Hey everyone, welcome to the Anacortes City Council meeting of August 19th, 2024. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Mr. Franciac, you take the roll, please.
Mr. Fantini.
Here.
Mr. Young.
Here.
Mr. Walters.
Here.
Ms. Cleland McGrath.
Here.
Ms. Moulton.
Here.
Mr. McDougall.
Here.
Ms. Hubick.
Here.
Thank you.
Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? All right, we start off with announcements and committee reports. I've got a few quick announcements. Just a reminder, Washington State Ferries has an open house, online open house, to share information and gather feedback on proposed changes to the Anacortes San Juan Island sailing schedule. The open house is online through Friday, August 23rd, and you can find that link on our city webpage. Fidalgo Bay Day is Saturday, August 24th. That's from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. at Fidalgo Bay Resort. This free family event includes touch tanks with living sea creatures, educational discovery station and prizes, local seafood, and kid-friendly crafts, and again hosted by the Samish and the Marine Resources Council, although I think I missed a letter in there. Marine Resources Committee. Open Streets, Sunday, August 25th, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Downtown streets between 2nd and 10th will be closed to traffic and open to bicyclists, walkers, strollers, and non-motorized movers of all types. Enjoy entertainment, exhibits, and fun for the whole family. Again, that's Sunday, August 25th. And then finally, just wanted to make an announcement. Wastewater treatment plant outfall in water was safely deposited on the floor of the Guimas Channel on Wednesday the 14th. Wow. So that was a major milestone in this $17 million project. A lot more work to do, but it was nice to get that. So you might have saw a lot of that activity on Wednesday there. All right, that's all I have. And over to council reports. Economic Development Committee.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Young.
Thank you. On the 13th, we had our Economic Development Committee meeting. It was myself, Amanda, Ms. Hubick, and Mr. McDougall, the staff, John and Stephanie, and James McCafferty from Western Washington University. And I'm not sure if I've got his assistant's name, but the point of the meeting was to go over some of the initial findings we had from the informal survey we did. We brought in like 5 stakeholders, major stakeholders. We've had the hospital, the port. We've had conversations with both refineries, the school district, those major stakeholders. It was just a group of 5 just to keep it small until we branch out from there. And we had each of them answer 4 questions for us. And each of those 4 questions dealt with a different issue, you know, successes or things that they were happy about or things that could use improvement. And so we sent that to Western Washington for them just to sort of take a peek at what we're hearing. And, you know, we got some great response. Part of that was to begin the process of understanding where we are as a city, what we're looking for, and if there's any variances between the different islands of influence, if you would. And part of that is to set the stage of information gathering and to receive feedback. And part of those first tools we will do is to begin a quantitative and qualitative survey study to figure out where we go from here and what are we finding. And the thing is that we've kept it all open such that we don't try to steer, but we also find out what the community is really looking for and if there are things that we can do. Some of the things that came up, you know, in our discussion was in having a round table, if you would, a group of people that when we decide that these are some of the things we may want to go after as a city or as a committee, then we use the influence that everybody has. Everybody's got a network, but if we could tether that together towards something, whether that means meeting with contractors, for example, to see how do we progress by way of development, whether it's housing, whether it's childcare. But sometimes that means going after the people you want to come and how that might work. So all of that is down the road, but what we really were looking for was to begin that process for the collection of data and surveys. And we're going to move forward from that by meeting with additional people. I think one of the next things that the committee is planning to do is also walk the streets again and try to meet with some people and hear what they have to say. Bruce, Amanda, anything you want to add to that? No. Okay. Well, the main purpose of this update is to tell you that we're making progress for sure. We're learning a lot about where we are as a city, and there's diverse interests. But one of the things that's been a little bit surprising in a way is that there is a common thread. And if we can focus on those things to help that, we have nothing to lose and everything to gain. So that's what we're working on. So we're pretty excited about it. And the people that have met with us really were very excited about it. We also met with the Downtown Association. So it's been a good meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think the HACS committee met. Okay, so 3C, Public Works Committee.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
The Public Works Committee, Mr. Young, Ms. Moulton, and I met right before this meeting. We talked about a number of items. First of all, we talked about the Habitat for Humanity project on city-owned property on West 5th Street. The Habitat group had applied for a pre-application meeting with the planning department to talk about what would be required to pursue a 3-unit development there. And Public Works brought this up in the context of our meeting because they've identified problems with stormwater in that entire neighborhood. And the Habitat project would be subject to limitations that are currently in place given the physical limitations of the stormwater system in that area, creating potentially a significant cost to any future development that wants to occur in that drainage area. We suggested that Public Works has more than just stormwater problems in this neighborhood. We've got pavement issues, we've got traffic control issues. No one has looked at sewer or water distribution lines, and what we would like to consider is how much of those various needs can be addressed in a holistic way rather than just a particular project or just imposing those costs on a particular developer. But all of that is subject to much more future discussion. Public Works' next step is to reduce their comments to writing, get them to the planning department, so the planning department can send them to Habitat so that they have some measure of how much it would cost them if they wanted to try to fix those issues on their own. We also talked about R Avenue. Public Works is finishing up change orders with our contractor for R Avenue. Specifically, we asked about what's happening with the landscaping on our avenue, and the answer is that they're going to forego really doing that work until the fall when water will occur naturally from the sky. So they're expecting seeding to happen in the next couple of months after they're finished up with the contractor and when we can anticipate significant enough rainfall to cover that. We talked about 12th and Commercial. This intersection project is probably 5 to 6 weeks until WashDOT is expected to approve our channelization plan and the intersection control. It's ICE. The acronym is ICE. It's the intersection. Okay, I'm not getting help on that. All right, anyway, so WashDOT has to approve the design for the 12th and Commercial roundabout, and we expect or intersection improvement, which is not anymore a roundabout, and we expect 5 to 6 weeks until they have approved that, after which we would then be able to go out to bid. And then finally, we talked about the Whistle Lake Dam, which is on our agenda, so I'll save that discussion for later. And then, if I might, the North Star Housing Task Force met today. We are planning a September 9th meeting with housing developers and housing nonprofits, basically to ask the question, what do we need to do as local governments, all the cities and the county, to get more housing development in Skagit County? And Mount Vernon reports from that meeting that they adopted an interim ordinance just a week or so ago to relax their parking requirements because they have some of the most stringent parking requirements for new housing development in the county, and they made a couple of tweaks to their code on an interim basis to help move some of that forward, and they expect to do more of that through their comprehensive plan update.
Okay, next up is Parks and Recreation Committee.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Hubick.
Thank you. So Parks and Rec meets quarterly, so we've got a lot of good updates for you. We also spoke about the Whistle Lake Dam that's on the agenda tonight, as well as the interlocal agreement with Skagit County for the depot expansion, so we'll save that for later on in the agenda. There are in-house discussions happening around updates to Storvik Park, so long-term planning, what's possible. And so the team is starting to talk about sand volleyball courts, which is super exciting. I'm going to start with one. Take it slow. This is not pickleball. So those conversations are happening internally, and they will reach out to the community for feedback. Feedback's always welcome. Just email us. There is also going to be some work being done to the Altair Americas Memorial Park over by the Preston. So there's just going to be a lot of renovations happening there. The park's not going away, so just don't be worried when you walk by it. And then there's also some work being done at the trails at the top of Cap Sante, headed down towards the east side. So late summer, early fall is the perfect time to do this work. There is also going to be, as Mayor Miller mentioned, Fidalgo Bay Days. The team will be out there doing outreach around the work that's happening on the trestle. So Saturday, August 24th out at Fidalgo Bay Resort, also the first day of college football, so we all make our choices. Out with Rex, the team is already starting to think about the Winter Wonderland Walk, which is happening December 13th and 14th. If anyone would like to volunteer before you're voluntold. They are also working with the school district on interlocal agreements with them and facility rentals and gym usage. And they are working with the team at the Anacortes Waterfront Alliance. There's been a lot of really good work done there. We want to continue that as much as possible. And then out in the different sections of the forest lands, we've had a really good summer. Jordan, who is our school resource officer, has been partnering with the Parks Department on behalf of public safety and has been going out there. It's been a really successful partnership. It's one of the things public safety has also been focused on. So we're really happy to hear how successful it's been. Parks is still working on mowing. A lot of the seasonal hires are leaving, and late summer soccer is starting very soon. Then the senior center is always busy, of course. Got an update on the air conditioner that was discussed last week. They are also already planning their next gala, which is going to happen next year, Memorial Day weekend. So as soon as tickets go on sale, get yours. They are going to be working with the foundation to put some work towards a community needs assessment. So it's sort of not really in conjunction with the comp plan and sort of not really in conjunction with the economic development stuff that we're working on, but everything is done circularly. So we'll all be talking with each other when that comes through. The senior center has a lot of new programs. They are doing an ageism awareness discussion group. They have a new hangout opportunity for different veterans in the area, and they are giving classes on powerful tools for caregivers. So just remember that the Senior Center has an online newsletter that is updated on the website if you would like to learn more about the programs offered there. And that's about it.
All right, thanks. Next up is Personnel Committee.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Fantini.
The Personnel Committee, which is myself, Councilmember Young, Councilmember Cleland McGrath, and Human Resources and Labor Relations Director Kendall Moyle, met last Friday. We were provided an update on our hiring and recruiting update. So in June, we hired 13, with most of those, of course, being seasonal. We had 3 exits. In July, we hired 3 more. with 2 exits. Currently, there's 9 active job postings, which include a contract public defense attorney, an IS technician, a senior engineering technician, a temporary associate planner, a temporary operations maintenance tech, a temporary water distributions maintenance tech, a temporary water treatment plant maintenance technician, a water treatment plant operator 2, and of course, police officers. And 4 levy lid positions are still open out of the 5. With that in mind, the entry-level police oral boards were held on July 19th, and the eligibility list was certified by the Civil Service Commission on the 22nd of July. We also covered again for a personnel policy update. The city's never had a formal telecommuting policy, a work from home, that type of thing. And so that came before us for discussion once again, and everyone agreed that it's time for that to come to council. So you should see that coming up on a future agenda pretty soon. I also provided the committee with something that I thought would be helpful. Code of ethics for our council. So I had gone to the AWC and saw that a lot of cities, including Mount Vernon, Burlington, and others, are making the move towards a more formalized code of ethics for their council. And I thought a great time to write something like that and to get that before council, hopefully for being passed, is a time when we don't have any problems with those type of things. So I've written that, and that will be still in the committee stage, but hopefully will come before council pretty soon. Also, the NeoGov recruitment platform update. HR has started training and has trial posted a few positions, which Director Mole said was going very well. So that's great that that system is starting to be used and implemented now. Also, an update on our Eden ERP replacement. So we've had some on-site demos, software demos, happened between June and July. There's a due diligence review right now from July to August, and then we'll have contract negotiations in August through September. And currently, we had Tyler Enterprises, and they were held on June 25th and 26th. Central Square, which came through on July 10th and 11th. Springbrook was held on July 17th and 18th, and Cogsdale is scheduled to come through on September 11th and 12th. Also, our police guild negotiations are getting ready to start, and we have 6 sessions total from now until November. Also, something new, well, not new, but something new to me, the Washington State exempt salary threshold increase. Director Moyle talked to us a lot about that. That's going to be effective on 1/1/2025, and this is basically where every year the state requires an increase in what our salaried employees are paid. Ms. Cleland McGrath did a quick calculation and felt that with the information we were being given, it's not going to be too big of a hit compared to the normal increases that folks would normally get, so that's really good to hear. But we will have a current review of exempt positions to determine if a reclassification is required, and that's something that will be done by Mayor Miller and Director Moyle. I think that was pretty much it.
All right, any other announcements or committee reports that I may have missed? Or any questions for the people who aren't on those committees? Okay, we'll move on to item 4, which is public comment. This is an opportunity for any member of the public that wishes to address the council on anything that is not on our agenda. We did receive written public comment for item 7F from Mr. Turner and Mr. Muntz, and that's been entered into the record. And again, we do always encourage written public comment, but for those of you who have signed up, always get to go first. So I have Lori Mall signed up with the topic of thank yous. And make sure the button and the light is, and
There we go.
there we go.
As you know, my name is Lori Mall. I own both Fidalgo Artisan Yarn and Clothing and the Wishing Rock. They're both located on the 700 block of Commercial Avenue in Anacortes. Tonight I'm here to say thank you to the community groups in the city who make Anacortes such a special place. I've been in business 10 years now, and this summer has been the best summer I've ever had. The 3 big downtown summer events, Whale of a Sail, Shipwreck Days, and the Arts Festival, brought tens of thousands of visitors into downtown and hundreds into my shops. The Downtown Anacortes Alliance took over running Whale of a Sail 2 years ago. Prior to that, I think there were only 3 of us that were participating. With the Alliance's hard work, smart marketing, and lots of time, care, and thought, the event has blossomed. This year, both my shops had record days. It was astounding, and please note that I was not the only business that had record days. Best of all, it was great fun for us, for our customers, and the community, not to mention the whales walking the streets. What a sidewalk sale. Shipwreck Days brings a lot of people into my shops, and although we don't have as many sales, it's a chance for people to discover us. Thank you, Rotary, for all of your work year after year. The Anacortes Arts Festival is an Anacortes signature event, and what an undertaking. I think they do it perfectly at this point. Thank you to Meredith, the staff, and the dozens of volunteers who make this great event happen. This is my favorite Anacortes event, and both of my shops do very well over this long weekend each year. And finally, thanks to the city. I suspect most departments are somehow involved in these events, from blocking off the streets to special watering of the containers, garbage collection, to emergency services standing by, and all the little bits that none of us know about. Thank you to LTAC Funding and to the council members, the mayor, city staff who all support our downtown businesses and our community. It makes a difference. I appreciate the chance to make a council comment this evening. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, and I know the council appreciates you taking the time to thank the city and our entire community for those events. All right, anybody else? All right, we will move on to our consent agenda, item 5A through C. Council?
Mayor Miller,
Mr. Young?
I move we approve the consent agenda, items A, B, and C.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Young, a second by Ms. Hubick to approve consent agenda items A through C. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. On to item 6, and this is a public hearing, and this is a public hearing on increasing solid waste rates. This is a discussion item, and I appreciate some staff pinch hitting. Normally, Mr. Hoagland would be presenting this, but had a personal issue that he had to take care of. So between Mr. Ram and Ms. Peck, I know we'll be able to communicate this. And this is a public hearing, so again, open for discussion item only and open for public comment. Mr. Ram.
Thank you, Mayor. So this public hearing is on a solid waste rate increase. On September 12th of 2023, Skagit County contracted Waste Management to provide long-haul transport and disposal of all solid waste collected at the Skagit County transfer stations. Both bids that they received were a 40% increase in transport and disposal costs over the previous contract. As a result of the cost increase, Skagit County Public Works conducted a solid waste rate study to ensure rates were sufficient to stay solvent. Just a quick side note, all Skagit County solid waste is landfilled in Roosevelt Regional Landfill in Klickitat County, Washington. So I thought that was kind of interesting to share. So on the slides here, so on June 14th, we received the letter that effective September 1st of this year, that the new rates are going to be increased. The rate increases will occur annually through 2028. The big one is this year, and then there's a minor increase for every year, basically, till 2028. That is pretty much what I had for that slide. And so these are the rates that they are proposing to charge. As you can see, the big step up. Right now, it's for it's $104 per ton starting next month. It's $137 per ton. Oh, I'm sorry, that's commercial. So we're a municipality, $131 a ton starting September 1st. I really am pinch hitting here. One other thing that we realized looking at the different gallon refuse totes that we have, so we have a 21 gallon, 32, 64 all the way up, is that the calculation to establish what the 21 gallon tote fee is currently incorrect. It's low by $2.51. So we wanted to write that so the 21 gallon tote people are paying equal amount of money as somebody that has a 64 gallon tote based, just obviously it costs more if you have a larger tote, but it was not proportional. So we're trying to write that, as well as deal with the rate increases that are being passed down to us by Skagit County. That's all I really had to share on this one. I guess the stats there are kind of interesting. 40% have a 36 gallon tote, while 44% have a 21 gallon tote. So it is a significant amount of people with those two size totes. So this is the important slide. These are the new monthly rates are on the right-hand side. You see the account count, as I said, that's how many accounts or customers we have for each of the tote sizes. The current charge, as well as the amount it's going to go up, and then the new monthly charge. We anticipate that this charge should be fine until 2025. No, I'm sorry, 2028, because we plan to do it all now. There's a couple reasons for that. Instead of waiting and incrementally just kind of, we call it boiling the frog, if you will, you just keep turning up the heat, is that we have a deficiency in our reserve in the solid waste. It's a separate utility, and you could, I guess, supplement general fund funds to it, but for the most part, it's just like water, sewer, and stormwater utilities. And so it has to have a certain level of reserve, and so we're trying to correct that as well in this rate increase. And the last tidbit, it has nothing to do with this rate increase, but we did send Waste Management. We have a contract with Waste Management to collect residential yard waste and recycling. We did use the option in our contract to extend the current costs to the current rates for another year. So we did buy us some time, but like before 2028, we're going to have to come back and obviously do another rate increase. But well, nobody's solid waste contract is decreasing, so that will happen, but it will happen in outer years, somewhere around 2026, 2027. That's my presentation that I slammed together at short notice. We are going to come back next week, so we'll keep the public hearing open. So if there are questions, we obviously can be prepared to come back with answers, either from the public or the council.
Yeah, and you may have seen in the resolution also, there's a staff recommendation that the council does not adopt the CPI increase that as part of it. That's in our fee schedule. But because these increases we understand are pretty significant, and they'll cover the expenses and without having to go out in the general fund. So, with that, any questions that we want to, or actually any member of the public wish to comment on this one? I plan on keeping the public hearing open through next week. All right, council, questions? Comments, concerns?
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Fantini.
I just had a quick clarification. So you said that this rate increase will make us good until about 2028, and then there's another one coming before 2028. Is that for the green waste? Is that how I read that?
I'm not sure about the green. Do you mean yard waste?
Yard waste.
Okay,
yes,
so
thank
yeah,
you,
so
sorry.
waste, we have a contract with. I was just making sure. We have a contract with Waste Management locally. So this rate increase is basically because the rate that the county charges us went up a lot, like $30 a ton, and so they're going to charge us for that on that end. But we also have a contract with Waste Management for recycling, residential recycling, and yard waste, and that contract is about to expire.
Got it. Okay.
But we extended it 1 year because we could, and to keep the current rates. But before 2028, we're going to be back again to discuss. We'll put it out. We'll see how the process goes on how we select our next hauler, or we could stay with Waste Management. But that'll happen before. So I didn't want people to feel like this is good till 2028. We're solid, because I just want to make sure everybody's aware that down the line, we're going to have to put our contract currently with Waste Management for our residential yard waste and recycling is going to be up, and it'll likely go up.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
Thank you for the presentation. I appreciate the need to increase rates to cover the increased costs that we're going to be paying at the transfer station. I don't agree that we need to add a 50% increase for the 21-gallon tote. I think that people that have the 21-gallon tote are arguably, assumedly, doing better at waste diversion, which is one of our goals, one of our policy goals as expressed in the countywide solid waste management plan is to get to a higher level of waste diversion than we're at. And if people can make do with those finicky little 21-gallon totes, I think that they should be incentivized to do that. So that might be why they don't currently cost the same proportionally for the other totes. And I'd prefer to keep it that way, have a proportional increase rather than a 50% increase on that smallest tote. And then in the resolution, there's a line that talks about the CPI increase, but it's before the enacting clause. And it says, we recommend, well, we are the city council in the context of the resolution. We don't recommend, we enact. So we need to fix that, put it in the fee schedule attachment. I'm okay with a 1-year waiver of the CPI increase because we're setting the rate this 1 year. I wouldn't be in favor of it being waived permanently, and we need clarity around that. So I would add that text to the Exhibit A in the resolution so we know for sure what happens with that going forward.
And Miller?
Yeah, we know about the whereas that needs to be fixed. And Mr. Young.
Thank you. I think it's probably very clear I've expressed reservations about what we call recycling. And that doesn't mean that I'm not a recycler. It does. It means that I try to recycle. But the challenge is in knowing what's really recyclable. I mean, you've got numbers on the bottom that says one thing and, you know, saying that it's recyclable, but it's not. And then there are certain things that the agencies will or will not take. And so, you know, all those are confusing. And at one time, the agency wanted to be able to take pictures because they have the ability to do that of whatever you're putting in, and they want to bill you for it. I struggle with that because I think that the education process for we as citizens that want to do the right thing, you know, recycle stuff, also needs the industry to help us with recyclable things. Choosing packages that your fruit come in or not. I mean, you don't have the option, really, you don't. But what I'm suggesting and thinking and hoping that they're listening, I've said it to them once before, that we really need to do more of an education process as to what they will or will not accept as we make it the goals and then push the industry, whether it's our legislators or whatever it is that we have to do, because it really doesn't give us what we like to believe. I know this is not about this topic, but I'm tying it on the back end of it simply because I think it's so important. You know, in my house, we try to reuse things at least twice. We do. And so, but that's just a personal goal. And I just think that our society would benefit so much more if we had a little bit more emphasis on education about these processes and push the industry to do more to make sure that those items that we are buying, whether it's our fruit, whether it's our, you know, whatever it is, you know, really is recyclable. And I think that that's an important part that we as a society really have to confront and finally deal with. Plastics are in everything, including the food we eat, the water we drink. And I find that concerning. So, you know, I'm bringing this up at this point to indicate that, first of all, I'm thankful for the work that, you know, you guys are doing and trying to make it come about. But, you know, on one hand, it almost seems as if, you know, we really are going to have to look deeply into what we can and cannot do and make those rules, albeit tough, something that we can all live with. And so I'm just raising the bar to indicate that, you know, as we go forward in these conversations, it'll be something I really want to discuss, and I'm hoping the other members of council will join me in that as well. Thank you.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Moulton.
Mr. Young brings up some really good points because recycling is confusing, and there have been a lot of changes over the years, and there's not consistency between city to city to county across the state. And legislators have been working on that really hard for the past 2 years, and there's another bill that's adapted that's going to come forward. So there will be more on the legislative side to try to make everything consistent, from the colors of the bins to what's accepted, and also to get the producers of the packaging to pay for the recycling because it's so expensive and just getting more so. People have a hard time affording it. Municipalities also do too. The costs are very high. So stay tuned on that. I do have a resource.
Can I add one thing?
Can
Hold
I,
on.
after I
Let-
finish maybe,
yeah.
would be good?
No, that was to your comment.
Okay, Mr.
Okay.
Young, you do not have the floor. Ms. Moulton.
Thanks. So on the WM site, Waste Management, there is a place where you can go, and there's a Recycling 101 page, and it tells you the basic rules, and then it gives a list of everything that's recyclable. So I think that maybe a good thing to do would be to put that on our city website somewhere, so it's easily accessible, because I did have to dig for it a little bit. So there's that. And then the last thing I wanted to add is that the county's website is a little bit out of date. This is just it says that the garbage is being taken to Klickitat County by rail, which it has been traditionally, but with the new WM contract, it's going by truck and rail to a landfill in Oregon. So that's just a trivia point that the county hasn't updated their site yet. Thanks.
Mr. Young.
Thank you, Mayor Miller. I guess what I wanted to say is to you is that, you know, it would be so helpful if you or anyone could let us know how we might be able to help that process legislatively, you know, voice our support to the committees or whatever that is. I just think that there's a lot of people out here that would love to sort of voice their support of it, and it would just, I think, benefit us all. Thank you, Carolyn, for the information.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton.
Oh, I just have one, I do have a quick answer for that. There's an organization called Zero Waste Washington, and they have a legislative work page that, as the legislative session starts ramping up, that is the best place to find the status of bills and the details about them, and it's like the one-stop place to look. So Zero Waste Washington is a great place to go. Thanks.
So for this legislative body, I'd like to try to flush out support for incentivizing the 21-gallon tote, since we'll have to do some recalculations of the math. Because when Mr. Hoagland presented this, and I know it was presented to at least the Public Works, and if not the Finance Committee as well, it was the math to get us right with our solid waste reserves as well. So gauge support for that first, and then we'll probably have to come back with some calculations on what that's going to be.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. McDougall?
I very much support Mr. Walter's statement about not having the, I guess, the 21-gallon bear as large a brunt of this change. I think, you know, $3 or $4 would be more reasonable, because we really do want to encourage basically less waste going into the system. And I thought Mr. Young made a great point about, you know, using stuff multiple times, which fundamentally slows the, you know, the speed at which waste accumulates anyway, makes it easier to do that 21-gallon. Thank you.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Hubick?
Thank you. Echoing the sentiment, I would like to see the 21-gallon refuse tote service price kept low. And I do have a question, though. So organics management has been a very big discussion at the state legislature, not just for us, but all along the West Coast, all along the entire United States. And 40% of all food that's produced is thrown away. Most food is wet and contains water, and so it's heavy. Do you know if waste management in this kind of year that we have before we renegotiate a contract with them, do they have any programs that can encourage people who may not produce a lot of household food waste to do like smaller bins and then divert that from the landfill? Because we do have some new organics laws that are going to go into effect in 2027 for more urbanized areas. I don't think that we're a big enough municipality to have that count, but have you had discussions with anybody about a pilot program that could help divert either the yard waste or the food waste or anything that can be commercially composted?
So not in this city, but I have talked to Waste Management representing other cities. So you can put your food waste in your yard waste bin. Just to make sure everybody knows that. That's a good way to divert it from the solid waste stream. So there's two different things there. There's the commercial aspect of organics diversion, and that's really hard. I've seen pilot programs do that. Waste Management did not do that, but there are companies out there that will help businesses get kind of up to speed. It's usually the cross-contamination is the main problem, where people will stand there and be like, which bin is it? And they're in a fast food, they're just trying to get out of there type of thing. But I have seen it work. You have the separate, bins there, because obviously they don't have landscaping, so they don't have a yard waste bin, so they have their own organics bin. And then for residential, again, it's just you put it in your yard waste bin, and that's the best thing you can do instead of putting it to landfill.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Hubick?
Real quick follow-up. So I guess my question is, have you seen a city do maybe a centralized food waste drop-off spot? I know the co-op in Bellingham has one. I watched somebody the other day just take their oat milk container and just plonk the food in there, which is great. But also I've got a yard. I've got the gigantic, green bin, but even half of the time it's only half full and I don't eat that much. I eat a lot, but I don't eat that much. So have you seen anybody successfully do it? Do you think that we could ask Waste Management to partner with us over the next 18 to 24 months to come up with something?
You just reminded me. So there is a program I've seen too, where you have a separate little garbage can that kind of sits on your counter. And then that's usually distributed by the city to divert yard food waste. Because it is hard to be like, oh, I just ate a banana. You go outside to your yard waste bin to throw it away. So that was one of the options that we could definitely explore. I would kind of highly recommend us doing that in-house instead of having Waste Management do it, because there's just going to be markup after markup, where it's kind of one of those things where we just buy the bins. If somebody wants one, we'll get it to them, or they can come get it from operations or City Hall or something like that. But that's what I would recommend for the residential piece. The commercial one's a bigger animal. It takes a lot of working with the businesses and years of trying to get it right. And but we could look at both for sure. I guess I would caution. I haven't seen Waste Management be real proactive on that front, where you can definitely be proactive, more proactive than Waste Management could be on our own accord.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton?
I just have a question. I'm looking at the solid waste fee schedule, and organics tote says the tote sizes are variable. So there's a 32, a 64, and a 96 apparently, which I'm not familiar with, and it looks like they're all the same rate. But maybe that's a misprint.
Are you looking at the slide, or are you looking at?
I'm looking at the packet. It's Exhibit A. It's
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters, I think you have it located.
Yeah, I do recall that it is all the same rate, despite the fact that apparently they offer multiple bin sizes. I think I've only seen the 64 and 96, and almost always the 96.
Yeah, at least on the table that we got up in the presentation, that recycling line, 32, 64, and 96, that includes the yard waste bin. Oh, no, wait, no, it doesn't. The recycling comes with the recycling is zero there because it comes with your garbage. Oh, here we go. I'm getting back up.
Again, while you're working on that, we'll obviously have some very detailed debates as we're negotiating the contract with Waste Management coming up. But obviously, this is we're talking our solid waste, which I know recycling is a part of that.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton.
I would also support keeping the rate low for the 21-gallon refuse toast.
Yeah, it feels like we've got a majority of council that supports that. I think what we'll do is try to propose the number, whether it's a 20% incentive or I'm not sure. But there's some good consulting going on there.
We're going to have to get back to you on the yard waste if there's a different. I thought everybody just got the same size bin and it was included in your recycle. I was looking at that too. Thank you for fixing that. Yeah, the name tag's wrong. But I need to get back to you, Councilmember Moulton, and the council. and
Yeah,
figure out
and-
what that's about.
And then we'll get back with a proposal for incentivizing the 21-gallon refuse tote, what that number is, that hopefully will be acceptable to council. All right, well, we're going to keep this public hearing open. Sorry, is there any other council comments on this?
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Cleveland McGrath.
Thank you. I would just point out, and it came up at our finance meeting a couple weeks ago, is the fact that we, at least from the finance committee discussions, it made sense for us to do the full 30%, 30.48% increase in one fell swoop versus doing, I think it's 24 or 26% this year, and then smaller step increases of a couple percent for the next couple years, just because we get a lot more calls about it. Why has it changed? And it kind of makes sense just to do it all in one fell swoop. And since we are right on that edge of the 19% in reserves, it doesn't give us a lot of buffer, but it gives us a little bit. We're not going the wrong direction. So I just wanted to point that out if anyone from the public is reading the packet, and we're aware that that's a little bit different than the structure that the county is implementing it. But I think it makes sense for the city.
All right.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
Not to belabor it too much, but because I don't get to say this very often, I think Mr. Young is absolutely right in his points about recycling. He's very right to be skeptical about what can be recycled and what can be diverted through recycling. And we ought to work on that as a city, as a state, as a country. And I understand there's an international plastics treaty that's now being negotiated to try to get at some of those problems. But in the meantime, while all those larger issues are being debated, the one thing we can do is stop buying as much stuff that needs to be thrown away. And, you know, Mr. Young mentioned the apples that come in plastic, and I've purchased those, and I just think it's insane. You know, I've done it myself, but it's so crazy to buy apples wrapped in these giant plastic containers. And if you've ever tried to fit anything that size in a 21-gallon tote, it doesn't work that well. So you might be inclined to put it in your recycle bin even if it doesn't fit. There's there are a lot of pieces to this, and that's why in 2021 I suggested some policy amendments to the comprehensive plan that would set some goals for us and then ask staff to try to come up with ideas to work us towards those goals. And so those haven't been dealt with so far, but they'll be rolled into the 2025 update. And the overall objective there is just figure out ways to incentivize, whether it's via smaller compost pails or something like that, like they use in Bellingham, or something else, a central compost repository like they use in Jasper, for example. We need new ideas in order to reduce these all the costs associated with this, and it really, really adds up. I mean, if you're getting the 96-gallon refuse trash tote, you're spending $83 a month under this new schedule, $63 under the current one, just for one modality of throwing away your stuff. There's much that we have to do in order to start reducing our costs for our residents, and this one requires a lot of creative thought. Not all of it's going to happen here. I think this is fairly simple, but there's a lot of work to do in the next couple years before our next waste management contract comes up, and we potentially miss other opportunities to figure out how to do things in a cheaper way.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Fantini.
Just a quick question. Is this the only time that we can adjust our rates that we're charging our constituents? Is when we are in this negotiation process? Like when this passes, we can't say a year from now decide that, oh, you know what, we should probably do it like this, or have, single person over 70, maybe they should be paying a little bit less for their, we can't change any rates once we do this. We're locked into these rates until.
You can change them every year. The reason we're raising these rates now is because Skagit County is raising their rates.
Sure. But if
yeah,
we
you
wanted,
can change it. You can change it in December.
Okay,
You
so
do your fee schedule every year.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Yeah, but you got to stay solvent. That's the thing.
Right, of
Okay.
course.
Yeah.
Okay, good discussion, and we'll be bringing this back soon. And again, if any members of the public wish to add to this discussion, please feel free to reach out. Okay, next up is item 7, which is 7A. It's a contract award, 2024 sewer mains replacement. This is a discussion item with possible action, and Mr. Rayam.
There it goes. Okay. Okay. Before you is a contract with Raw Land Construction in the amount of $464,717 to install 66 linear feet of 8-inch PVC sewer main, 9 manholes, and then reconnecting 18 services to the new sewer main and restoring the street once complete. This project is part of the city's ongoing annual inflow and infiltration, also known as I&I reduction program. These specific pipes have been selected due to camera inspections identifying root intrusion and groundwater inflow into the pipe due to the root intrusion and other aging pipe issues such as cracks and settling. That's all I got. There's a map. I know there's a map of the locations.
There is a map.
It's high
right.
quality.
All right, questions for Mr. Rayam on this contract?
Miller?
Ms. Moulton?
Thank you for this. And do we have a budget, a yearly budget for I&I?
Yep. Yeah, we do.
And
I think it's
One.
I don't remember off the top of my head. It's in the CFP. It's an I&I reduction program.
I think it's 1.5 million, but
Okay. So we did do some lining this year too. There's 2 projects for this year's budget for I&I reduction. One was the lining, which we've already done. It came to council and we've already did the work. This is the second one where this is actually we're going to trench down and take the pipes out and the manholes.
I'm sorry, what was the first one you said that we did?
It was a lining project, so instead of trenching down and taking the pipes out, you can actually do a liner on the inside of the pipe, which makes it watertight.
Oh, that's great, and thanks. I just was kind of looking for context of if this was, so it sounds like this is about a third of our annual budget. Okay, cool, thanks.
any other questions, Mr. Rayam? All right.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. McDougall?
I guess if no further questions, I move that City Council authorize the mayor to sign contract 24-112-SEW-001 as presented.
Second.
Motion by Mr. McDougall, a second by Mr. Young to approve the contract as presented. Any additional discussion? Mr. Franciac, vote please.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Walters,
Yes.
Ms. Cleland McGrath,
Yes.
Ms. Moulton,
Yes.
Mr. McDougall,
Yes.
Ms. Hubick,
Yes.
Mr. Fantini.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thanks. Next up is item 7B, contract modification water system plan update. Mr. Rayam.
Thank you, Mayor. Before you is a contract amendment in the amount of $106,292, increasing the total contract with Corollo Engineering to $603,952 to develop the city's water system plan. The city originally contracted Corollo in 2021. Since then, the city acquired the South Fidalgo water system, which made a rippling effect through the work to date that now needs to be redone. In addition, the original fire flow requirements provided by the city to the consultant were based on information from an insurance company instead of the actual analysis that we used in the past. And so we need to adjust the fire flows to basically match what our fire flow requirements were in the past. And that also needs to make the one model run again. A big reason for that is that when we first got the model results and your capital investment in the system, it was to the tune of $100 million. And we were like, why is that so much? And then we kind of dug in and looked into like why the fire flows were so much that we probably could have every fire engine in some locations at a fire that we would still not have enough equipment to use that amount of water. And so we've adjusted those back to the standard fire flows, and so they need to rerun the model. The last piece too, there were some I think we thought we'd be creative and try to do a few chapters of the water system plan on our own accord, and quickly discovered that A, we didn't have time, and then B, we didn't have the qualified people on staff. The main one was the water treatment plant to document for the Department of Health how we treat the water. And so that has been added back to the consultant's contract with this amendment.
All right, questions? Council?
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Young?
I move that the city council authorize the mayor to sign a modification to contract 21-173-WTR-001 with Corollo Engineers, Inc. in the amount of $106,292, increasing the total contract price to $603,952.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Young and a second by Ms. Hubick to approve the contract modification as presented. Any additional discussion? Mr. Franciac, vote please.
Mr. Walters.
Yes.
Ms. Cleland McGrath.
Yes.
Ms. Moulton.
Yes.
Mr. McDougall.
Yes.
Ms. Hubick.
Yes.
Mr. Fantini.
Yes.
Mr. Young.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, next up is 7C, Contract Award, Whistle Lake High Hazard Potential Dam Risk Assessment. And Mr. Aham, still here.
Yeah, I'm still here. Last one. Then I'll hand it over to John. Before you use a contract with Widener and Associates in the amount of $246,452 to assist the city in conducting survey, geotechnical analysis, and hydrological analysis of the dam that holds Whistle Lake Dam at its current water elevation. If the dam was to fail, there are structures and streets downstream that could be impacted in addition to the water level in Whistle Lake lowering. Widener and Associates has been contracted with the city to manage the permitting and Washington Department of Ecology interactions. There's some debate on how long, but about 10 years. This has included grant submittals, permitting, and working with ecology on what needs to occur to either improve the dam status of poor or develop a solution to improve the current dam. It's not only poor, but it is rated the worst dam in the state, which is not the coolest title to have. The one side note, the wrong corporation entity was listed on the contract as DJK Incorporated. Widener and Associates is like their branding name, and then they have like a corporation behind. Anyways, so DJK is no longer in existence, and it has been replaced. So we would request that if council does move to approve this contract, that they also direct staff to change the contract corporation name to Cowling and Company LLC.
Okay, and just to not panic the public, it's rated the worst dam because we don't know anything about it, not that we know that it's the worst dam.
Yeah, it's not imminent to fail at all. It was built 125 years ago. We have no idea how it was built. There's no plan set. There's no information about what is actually holding that lake back behind that dam. So that's why
it gets the bad rating because it's unknown.
Yeah, and then with this contract, we actually will know what it's made of and like how it was built, and so we will not be the worst dam in the state, hopefully by then. And then just so you guys know too, I thought it was weird when I first heard it, but Washington Department of Ecology does regulate dams in the state. It's kind of an odd fit, but I guess it makes sense from where do you put that, what department you put the dam safety under, so.
Okay, questions? And of course we have parks reps as well.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Fantini.
Just a quick question. In the agenda bill, it says that this contract is reimbursable up to 65% through the Department of Ecology. What determines that up to? Like how?
It's 65%.
It's going to be 60. Okay.
Yeah. Unless you have costs that are not grant eligible, but this is, I mean, they're really encouraging us to do this with funding.
Mayor
Mayor.
Miller.
Mr. Walters and then Ms. Moulton, I think.
In our Public Works Committee discussion, we recounted the sorry history of the Whistle Lake Dam, starting from about 4 years ago when we first got the letter from Ecology saying, hey, you have a dam. We know nothing about it. What are you going to do about it? And the initial response from Public Works was, well, we're gonna go cut down a bunch of trees and build a road to the dam so that we can then get access to the dam. And that was too much. I mean, it was 100+ trees. Ms. Moulton knows all the details because she was very involved at that point. And then we, I think, took a step back and said, look, we need to investigate the dam before we start doing work to build roads and determine a course of action, including cutting down the trees on the dam, because it's an earthen dam, there are trees growing out of it. Is cutting down trees a good idea or a bad idea with respect to dams? We don't really know. So we recounted that history for Public Works to make sure that Public Works is aware of it and aware of the concerns that council has expressed in the past about the dam and the proposals to fix the problem of the dam. This contract here is certainly more measured. There will be some tree cutting, but pretty small numbers of trees compared to what we were talking about before, and only to the extent that is required to get a drilling rig, I guess, to the dam to take some samples and determine what is there. So I think, speaking only for myself, I'm okay with moving this forward, but it is going to yield some conclusions, and I think we need to be very well informed all along the way here before we get too far ahead of ourselves, like we did 4 years ago, and to make sure that we keep this moving forward, because we do have a responsibility to make sure that the dam doesn't fail and that people in unincorporated Skagit County aren't affected by any failure of the dam, and that we don't negatively impact the lake. So I'm okay with this contract right now, notwithstanding the issues with the contractor, and I'd be okay moving it forward, but only this step. You know, the next steps we've just really got to be very well informed about and take very considered action on.
Ms. Moulton.
Thank you. Yeah, so that 4 years ago process, I'm glad we stepped back from that. I really appreciate that. So now it's 10 trees proposed to be cut down instead of 127 that were marked with orange paint to be cut down. I do kind of have a problem with this just because it's $250,000 to say, is the dam gonna hold up, which the dam has been holding up. And I'm not an engineer, I'm not a scientist, but it's just really hard because it's $250,000, first of all. And then the alternatives analysis will be to evaluate our different choices if it's not in compliance. Well, I hope to heaven that it is within compliance, but I really kind of doubt that it is. So to me, this is going down a road of a lot of money and a big mess for a dam that is working, but because ecology doesn't have enough information, here we go with all the money to pay for it, so they can have information to determine that it's going to need to be replaced or buttressed. So I just want to say that some of the alternatives are building a backup dam downstream from the existing dam, or removing the dam altogether. You know, maybe it's maintenance, but I kind of think that this dam is not, if there's some kind of code, this dam is not to code. So I just really shudder at the thought of I mean, it's 10 trees now, but I mean, I just like don't like where this is headed at all, and I never have from the start. And I also wonder, and this might be a foolish question, what if we don't do it? What's ecology gonna do?
So the Department of Ecology is a regulatory agency, and I'd say they're giving us grant money to try to get this going if they will switch gears.
Right, and I mean, I get newsletters from ecology about people who have like massive oil leak violations, and they charge them like $10,000. So this is probably crazy, but like we're gonna spend $250,000 and then like maybe millions, and it's gonna be a huge, to my mind, disruption of that whole tranquil area. and it's gonna cost so much money, like, can they just charge us, I mean, what if they charge us $250,000 in penalties, which they probably wouldn't even do? I mean, I know this is kind of a crazy line of questioning, but it's just deeply disturbing to me.
So ecology typically I've seen too is their path is, yeah, if you had one violation, it's 10,000, but it's per day. And so they'll get to the point where they'll say like, okay, we were being nice before, now we're going to regulate you, and then it will be a by day consequence.
Because I think they feel like they're being nice by providing 65% of the. But
Yeah, it wasn't
not-
65%
Yeah.
until we drug our feet to this point.
Yeah.
Sure.
But I appreciate that line of question because I had the same concerns. Like, okay,
And I also.
why do we have to do this? Sorry, Ms. Moulton.
I'm sorry, and I also, of course, we want it to be safe. We don't want it to blow out and hurt people downstream, obviously. But to me, this is just like, it's just a really tough one for me. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Fantini.
So with that 65%, it ends up being a little less. I also agree with Ms. Moulton that this could turn into a very costly report. If, for instance, it does turn into a very costly report, are there other grants that can be applied for? Is there other opportunities to go after funding for what I agree will be something they tell us we have to do? Is there, or do we have opportunities to go after grants for that, or?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, there was a former career job I had that there was a similar situation. Yeah, the state helped tremendously. Dams are not inexpensive, even this one. So yeah, there would be state funding support.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters.
Completely agree with the sentiments Ms. Moulton expressed. It's just there aren't really any other options in front of us other than what we've been presented with, and getting $65,000 paid for, or 65% rather, paid for is a good deal. And the remainder will be paid for from the water fund as part of the regional water system. So that means that Anacortes taxpayers will pay ratepayers effectively only 10% of that. So it's relatively inexpensive for us at this stage. And certainly, yes, it could become more expensive for us once we know more about it, but that's not a reason to not learn more about it. And I think Mr. Aoum is quite right. I recall working with Ecology on a water quality violation that I was prosecuting for the county, and I believe the upper limit of their authority was fining $10,000 a day for the 4 cows that were in the creek. So I would like to stay on Ecology's good side at this point, and continue to enjoy their support in finding grant money to help us work through this problem.
All right, any other questions or comments? Motions perhaps to move this forward?
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Hubick, sorry.
Thank you. I move that the city authorize the mayor to sign contract 24229 ENG 001 with the corrected company name, organization name?
The Cowling and Company LLC.
Thank you. In the amount of $246,452.60 to perform the Whistle Lake Dam HHPD risk assessment.
Second.
A motion by Ms. Hubick, a second by Mr. McDougall to approve the contract as presented with the change of the name, the correct name of the company. Any additional discussion? Mr. Franciac, vote please.
Ms. Cleland McGrath.
Yes.
Ms. Moulton.
No.
Mr. McDougall.
Yes.
Ms. Hubick.
Yes.
Mr. Fantini.
Yes.
Mr. Young.
Yes.
Mr. Walters.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thanks. Next up is item 7D. This is interlocal agreement with Skagit County for a depot plaza, and funding coming the correct direction, I think, this time. Mr. Lunsford.
Mayor Miller, council members, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So before you, item 7D is an interlocal agreement with Skagit County, and tonight I'm asking for your consent to approve this interlocal. This will fund a grant we received to create an extension to the Depot Plaza to the south. So if you can picture current Depot Plaza in brick behind the depot, and to the south is the WT Preston, and in that new field that we've created there by removing the railroad rails and ties is where we'd like to do this. So this area in the hatch. So that will work with what the port is planning for Market Street and Altair Americas Park, and will give us an ability to add more space for the market and other community events. So the amount is $250,000. We asked for $500,000, but we have to share with the rest of the county because that's a generous thing to do. And so these elements are part of what we're planning on doing. Electrical and water utilities, as they currently exist in the plaza, would exist here as well. Stormwater management on site through the use of pavers. Although because we didn't get the full grant amount, we might have to use some concrete, stamped concrete, as we've done in other places. Accessible service for mobility. Coordinate with the Jim Rice Civic Park amenities, such as Altair Americas of the Preston and the Port of Anacortes' North Basin Plan. Construction is slated for next year, with our goal to be ready for market season in 2026. And if you have any questions, I'm happy. That's AI generated. I typed in Brick Plaza Farmers Market Northwest, and certain elements appeared. So that's not what it's going to look like, but that's what we got.
All right. Usually not too controversial to ask council to accept funds, but council, questions for Mr. Lunsford?
Mayor Miller,
Ms. Moulton?
good job on getting this money. That's awesome.
It was a team lift, so Ms. Jordan and many other folks on staff helped with it, but thank you. I'll pass that along.
Yeah, and it's also good, I appreciate in the agenda bill saying that the market attracts over 71,000 customers a season, supports 150 local farms and businesses, and the last time we expanded the Depot Plaza, the farmers market grew by 43% afterward. So I think this is great, but I'll let other people speak.
Yeah, they've been very much a part of this discussion as well, so they are part of the team that's going to be working with us to help get the final product.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters?
I think this has the potential to be a great project. I appreciate you going after the money. I wish that this project were listed in the capital facilities plan because we didn't get all the money we asked for. So my question is, what happens when we design the project and it is in fact a $500,000 project? We only have $250,000.
So we're going to work with an engineer to design it so we can meet stormwater requirements. But I think by the pavers and such, that it's very labor intensive what we did currently behind it, but we want to keep that same design. So we're looking at some cost saving elements, maybe putting some of the utilities on the sides and pedestals. That's one thing the farmers market needs now but doesn't have. It's instead of the in-ground that we have. There may be some in-ground as well. We could use concrete as a cost-saving measure instead of some of the pavers throughout like we've done, but to make it blend in a cohesive way to match what's there. So stamped colorized concrete could be used, but stormwater could be relegated with some pavers in place. So we'd work on our stormwater plan through ecology for that. We'd try to stay out of the shoreline jurisdiction with this because that element is close by but not throughout. So we would cut off there and maybe use grass and lawn in some spaces there. And then we would work on potentially, instead of doing pavers throughout if you can picture Market Street coming into the depot, the plaza, we might do asphalt there as another cost-saving measure. So trying to blend all those elements to save as much money as we can, but keep mobility for ADA requirements and meet the needs of the market while keeping the aesthetic throughout that we've already established. So those are our goals, and so that's what we're going to look at how we do that. It may have to be done in phases if we can't quite reach it, but we won't know until we go out and get the engineer's estimate for sure.
I think all of those things make a lot of sense, but it could very well be that we need $350,000 to do that scope of work, and I'd rather not cut the $100,000 worth of the theoretical scope of work that I'm envisioning. So if it were in the capital facilities plan, we would have, number one, complied with the statute, which requires it to be, but number two, have some other funding allowed or planned for that project. And there's still time. I mean, we could still dedicate more funding to this project because the integrations with the new Market Street and the future event center could be very valuable. So I don't think that we should tell parks that they're purely limited to the amount of grant money that they've brought in here. You know, there would be other potential sources that we could use, maybe impact fees. I mean, a lot of these require it to be in the capital facilities plan, but impact fees or REIT or other sources potentially we could use, and that could really help make this a very nice project. If you could do it all with 250, that is fantastic. But if not, I would hope that you would come back to us and ask us to program additional funds.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Young.
Thank you. Again, Mr. Lunsford, you bring us a complete idea, and what I've begun to see that each time you bring something to the council, the depth of your analysis, your forward thinking, as well as cost benefit analysis is superb. It really does. I loved how even your AI stuff is getting good too. So, but you know, I think that this expansion is a wonderful thing. I mean, that whole area of what we are looking to do along the waterfront is a major part of a welcome that will, you know, an activity that will be along there. And I think that this is a continuation of, you know, that effort. You know, quite honestly, I got married at the depot there, and you know, we had a tent on the back of the depot, and it was festive, to tell you the least. It really was. So I love the idea and the utility of that. I do think that coming forward, we really need to look hard at what our vision is for that region, and things that were once appropriate may need to change just a little bit. Uses of space, I think it's just a part of what we envision our city and entrance to be as we work in tandem with the Port of Anacortes. So, you know, but I really appreciate that. And I don't know how to say it, and I'm gonna try to say it as politely as I can. I think that there are some sacred cows we really need to look at and see whether or not it's part of the vision there in that use of space. Is it the most appropriate use of that space? And, you know, so anyway, thank you for the work that you do and the team that you guys have together on these projects. I'm always delighted to read your synopsis and what you say about it.
Thank you, Mr. Young.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Cleland McGrath.
Thank you. I was just curious, and maybe this is the cart before the horse, but how you'll address, or if it will be addressed in this plan, kind of the garbage containers that are kind of just out back right now, which I understand why, but now that that whole space is going to be connected, will you have some more formalized, like, I don't know, fencing or kind of visual elements? Will that be part of this plan too? That was one question. Then how will it transition, or are you going to figure out how to transition from the existing plaza to this new space?
So if, let me see if I can get there. Okay, whoops. Okay, so that's a great question, thank you. So if you can see the map and my cursor, the garbage cans you're talking about are in this zone here. And so we've talked about ways, working with the our engineer, how can we make that, because they're convenient there, because both the market and our events use them, and so people, it's hard to move garbage after a wedding or whatever from the depot much further. So we're trying to find ways that we can do that, and you have the large madrona trees that are quite healthy right next to them, so we have some limited space. And now this nice, with the improvements at the RV park, it's not shown here, but you have a crosswalk here. So all these elements are coming together, and we're trying to figure that out with our engineer. So how can we work to make it more aesthetically pleasing, but also be functional and allow folks mobility, because there's a nice ADA parking on our avenue here, and people can now use that to cut across, because the port has done some very nice work to get access to that area if they want to stroll through that area and have low mobility, for example. So we're trying to put that all together in a sensible manner. So thank you for that question.
Thank you. And I'm glad that that will be part of the discussion when we look at that. And then also, will the Connex boxes that are currently used for storage on the plaza, is that going to be part of the discussion too?
It will be part of the discussion. It was certainly part of the discussion when I had a $500,000 grant, but we'll just see how that goes.
Okay, is anyone on council interested in accepting $250,000 to
Mayor Miller.
stretch to do everything possible in the market area? Mr. Fantini.
If there are no further discussion points, I move that the council authorize the mayor to execute interlocal cooperation agreement 24-228-PRK-001 between the city of Anacortes and Skagit County.
Motion by Mr. Fantini, a second by Ms. Ubik to authorize the interlocal as presented. Any additional discussion? Mr. Franciac, vote please.
Ms. Moulton,
Yes.
Mr. McDougall,
Yes.
Ms. Hubick,
Yes.
Mr. Fantini,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Walters,
Yes.
Ms. Cleveland McGrath.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, next up is item 7E, Ordinance 4086, amending AMC Titles 15, 17, and 19 for the purposes of renumbering and removal of expired provisions. It's a discussion item, possible action, and I have Mr. Walters on here, but Mr. Coleman, did you want to present it before I turn it over to Mr. Walters?
Oh, I thought I would
Okay.
take a quick run at this
Okay.
one. This one was largely put together by Councilman Walters, so I'll let him weigh in. I thought I'd go over some of the highlights of what this ordinance is attempting to do. It's really cleaning up a lot of the municipal code as shown in the report put together entirely by Mr. Walters. We'd be removing chapter 1524, which has engineering development service fees. They're already incorporated in the city's unified fee schedule, so that is no longer necessary. This ordinance also would remove chapter 1532, underground utilities, out of Title 15. It's proposed to be recodified into AMC Chapter 15 or 1959. So Chapter 19 is our development regulations, the Unified Development Code. We moved Chapter 17, which was largely our zoning code, into Chapter 19 a couple of years ago. And so this is ongoing cleanup process. You'll also see that Chapter 17.75, which is essential public facilities, was never taken out of Chapter 17 for not entirely sure what reason, but that is part of the development code, so that is proposed to be put into Chapter 19 as well. And then back to Chapter 15, the urban center development contains the city's multifamily property tax exemption program, which expired. And so that's proposed to just be eliminated. And it's noted here, if we were to ever do a multifamily tax exemption program, we'd start from scratch and not reuse this, so there's no purpose in having this. So that would effectively eliminate all of Title 15 and 17 as things are moved around, so those could be deleted. And then Chapter 1943 contains design standards that are proposed to be recodified in an easier to read way. This ordinance doesn't actually change any substantive code. It's just moving things around and deleting redundant things or expired things.
All right, thank you for that. And I do have this asterisk if any member of the public wishes to help us renumber the code, but I'm pretty sure that no one's memorizing the code to renumber. So I will, I'll offer the floor to Mr. Walters if he wants to chime in.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
Yeah, just Mr. Coleman did a good job summarizing it. The only other point I would make is that it is important that we do this now so that when we propose substantive changes to the code that we're working off the new numbers. And that last bit, the housing design standards, that came to our attention as we tried to look through what the design standards are in the housing action plan for cottage housing, or they were sort of hard to find. And that's because they're weirdly not in the same level of hierarchy as the commercial standards or the institutional standards. So this brings them up so you could find them in the table of contents and without any substantive changes to any of these things.
Mayor Miller,
Mr. Fantini.
I appreciate the cleanup, and I move that unless there's further discussion, the City Council approve the ordinance as presented.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Fantini and a second by Mr. Young to approve ordinance 4086. Do we need to have a waiver of the two-read rule? Yes, that's right. I thought that might be the case. So, Mr. Fantini, if you want to amend your ordinance to include, amend your motion to include the waiver of the two-read rule.
I will amend my motion to waive the two-read rule since there's no substantive changes.
Thank you. Okay, motion by Mr. Fantini and a second by Mr. Young to waive the two-read rule for ordinance for council and approve the ordinance 4086 as presented. Any additional discussion? Mr. Franczak, vote please.
Mr. McDougall?
Yes.
Ms. Hebick?
Yes.
Mr. Fantini?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Walters?
Yes.
Ms. Cleland McGrath?
Yes.
Ms. Moulton?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, final item for tonight is 7F, and this is a review of Planning Committee's Housing Action Plan recommendations. This is a discussion item with possible action. Mr. Coleman.
Well, thank you again. So this was something that was talked about during the docketing discussions. In 2023, the city passed the Housing Action Plan. That action plan includes sort of what we refer to as a menu of items that the city can do to help bring down housing costs or make it possible for more housing to be built in a variety of different income ranges. So making sure that there's housing for everybody that needs housing, not just in certain sectors. So that was a list of items that was presented. It wasn't necessarily something that the city intended to do all of. There is a lengthy list of items there. So Councilmember Walters went through the Housing Action Plan and identified all of the development regulation changes that are identified in there and put them in this list that you see on this agenda item. So that list is, first of all, just a list of all of the items, and then the planning committee went through all of those and tried to identify the ones that would have the most bang for their buck as the planning commission reviewed it. So I should probably take a step back and say, what's going to happen with this list, this menu of items is it's going to go to the planning commission for public review as part of the comprehensive plan update process. So the planning commission will now be able to look at each of these in depth, spend time, receive public comments, do additional research, ask help from staff, and look at each of these and make a determination as to whether or not they should be enacted, and if so, under what specific codes. There aren't necessarily like code language in here, so we're going to have to develop that for a lot of these. because there's a large list of these, council thought they would recommend to the Planning Commission the ones that are going to have the most bang for their buck, the ones that we really need to do necessarily because of new state laws, and ones that might have already been completed, as well as if there's some that maybe don't have a lot of bang for their buck, or for whatever reason that's discussed by the Planning Committee, they recommended some be excluded. There's no intention for us to do all of these, so I think this was intended to be a way of culling down this list so the Planning Commission didn't have to work on all of them. So what would happen next is after the City Council makes their recommendations tonight, that'll go to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission can start working on the ones that the council feels are going to be the best for the Planning Commission to spend their time working on. Note about the list, it includes the development regulations that items that were in the Housing Action Plan. There are some larger items, the programmatic items that are not specific development regulations. Those are not included in the list. They are listed in the Housing Action Plan. I'm going to let the council, the Planning Committee, talk a little bit more about that. And so these are up for discussion tonight. If the idea was the Planning Committee was going to make recommendations to make it easier for the council as a whole to discuss, but it's up for the council to make a recommendation ultimately tonight. Leave the discussion to the Planning Committee now to fill in.
Okay, thank you. So this is a discussion item with possible action, and it seems appropriate before the council debates this. To any member of the public wish to address the council on this? Okay, Planning Committee members started off, or anyone on council?
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
I would just reiterate a couple of Mr. Coleman's points. One is that when we adopted the Housing Action Plan, we included a line in the resolution saying we're adopting this as a menu. We are not necessarily adopting this plan as an instruction set to go forth and do all of the things that are in it. Some of them require money. Those aren't development regulations. Those aren't comp plan amendment proposals. But some of the comp plan amendment proposals would change zoning lines and those kinds of things. I think we largely recommended not to do those. There was one about parking, changing the parking requirements. We said that we have pretty good parking standards. We probably don't need to get rid of those. So there's an include recommendation on minimum parking standards, but an exclude on the on-street parking and an include on the guest parking. They're all very much detailed in the plan. But in addition to those that we think have good bang for the buck, there are some that are potentially third rails. And so we tried to identify those that are third rail. The third rail is the one that electrocutes you. And suggest that we not try to tackle some of those.
Any other comments? And I guess it was the idea of the Planning Committee that short-term rentals was not a developmental regulation, and that's why it was not included.
Mayor Miller.
3.1. Mr. Fantini.
I just had a thank you very much for going through and doing a lot of the work, the Planning Committee. I'm glad to hear that it's going to be going to the Planning Commission for further vetting, as well as more opportunities for public comment, which I think is important because a lot of the things on here are a lot of things that I hear from people that they're very interested in but might not have time to make it to the meeting. So I did have a question on the short-term rental of it all. Back when we discussed, there's two items that I was super interested in on here, and neither of them made it onto this list. One would be the short-term rentals. We had a recommendation from the Planning Committee back several months ago talking about owner-occupied short-term rentals, and at that time, Mr. Walters had made the statement that that's something that we should address during the comp plan. So I'm just wondering at what point in the comp plan will we be addressing owner-occupied short-term rentals? Is that something that we need to send to the Planning Commission now to talk about? Or are we good with the recommendation that they've already provided us, that owner-occupied short-term rentals should be allowed? When would be the appropriate time to have that conversation?
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters?
Short-term rentals are mentioned in the Housing Action Plan, but they're in the programmatic strategies. They're not listed as proposed change to the development regulations. They certainly could include changes to the development regulations, but also would have other programmatic components in enforcement and licensing and those kinds of things. So we didn't address whether it should be included or excluded in this list. Council could decide, I suppose at any point, to, because it's a development regulation, to instruct planning staff to work something up and send it to the Planning Commission, but we didn't address it here.
That's something, Mayor Miller?
Mr. Fantini?
Sorry.
Yep.
That's something that I would be very interested in, because we did have several people come before us, and I'm not talking about necessarily the real estate developers or those folks. I'm talking about specifically owner-occupied short-term rentals. You know, we talk about addressing housing affordability. There were several folks that stood up and talked about how being able to rent their basement as a short-term rental occasionally, or their ADU as a short-term rental occasionally, allowed them more income to be able to afford things like living in Anacortes. And so I just think it's really important that we don't just wrap that up with all of the short-term rentals, and that I think it's a good idea for us to address that and talk about that. Again, I'm not talking about ending a moratorium on all short-term rentals. I'm specifically talking about what we've seen, the owner-occupied short-term rentals being allowed pretty much anywhere in the city. All of the studies that were cited during that process showed that owner-occupied short-term rentals do not affect the availability or the affordability of housing. That's even, I believe, discussed in this action plan. So I don't want us to lose sight of that, because I think that is something that could help out quite a few families, in fact. The other question that I had is, and again, I know it's not a development regulation, so my question would be, when can we have the discussion about it, would be 5.1, which is multifamily tax exemption program. I know that's not a development regulation, but that is something that, as we're looking to incentivize builders to build more multifamily units, I think would be a very, very attractive item. I know that we have listed in here about height bonus program, but I think that we've heard from some of our developers that the height bonus program isn't necessarily as attractive as it was originally thought to be. So when would it be a good time to talk about that multifamily tax exemption program? Is that?
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters?
The multifamily tax exemption program, which we repealed a couple minutes ago, could be addressed at any time, because it's not a development regulation, it's not a comp plan amendment, it's only a tax program. We on the planning committee have talked to a series of developers over the last couple of years. One of them, that being the developer of Fidalgo Flats, the 5-story building, has expressed interest in the MFTE. The others did not express interest in the MFTE, largely because they were planning to build and sell, not build and hold. And those developers would prefer, which would require state legislation, a sales tax exemption. And so that's why City Council has included that proposal in our legislative priorities for the last couple of years. But still, other communities have made use of the multifamily tax exemption program to good benefit. We had it on the books here for 5 years and no one took advantage of it at all. But it was also constructed sort of poorly. It had a lot of requirements like LEED certification and those kinds of things that upped the cost of construction at the same time you were trying to reduce it through the multifamily tax exemption program. One other thing I would say about that, though, is that we did get a lot of negative feedback about it at the time Fidalgo Flats was proposed. It didn't take advantage of the program because the program didn't exist, but there was concern that it would. But in summary, we can talk about it at any time. We could do it at any time. We could adopt it next week if we had it written up.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was hoping to just spark the debate because I was just having a hard time figuring out how, for example, ADU regulations is different than debating owner-occupied short-term rentals.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, sorry, Mr. Fantine, I think you still had the floor.
I do. I have a few
Okay.
more. I'm sorry. It's
And
just
then Ms.
I read this
Cleveland
whole
McGrath.
thing, so I had,
Yeah.
I had some more. I also was curious about when we get into 2.3, which is the ADU regulations. I know that we adopted that state bill. I can't remember what the number was a while ago. That there were a lot of things in it that didn't necessarily have to be adopted for municipalities under 20,000 people, but we did adopt it at that time. And I just had a question. Currently, we have no impact fees in place for any ADUs. Now, I'm certainly not suggesting creating impact fees for, mom and dad that want to build an ADU in their backyard for their son or daughter or kid or whoever. But we do have a lot of development that happens, and not having an impact fee for any ADUs is something that I could see being taken advantage of. And also, when you do put in an ADU, especially now that we have voted to allow for 2 ADUs on certain units, that is something to me that would definitely have an impact on the infrastructure of the area. So I'm just curious, in this ADU, in this ADU regulations, will there be talk of taking a look at impact fees and seeing if there are any that would be appropriate? Is that something that would be talked about through this?
I think Ms. Cleveland McGrath, did you chime in before? Okay. No, I'll make sure everybody has an
Sorry,
opportunity to chime
yeah,
in.
I have a few more, but
I don't know if you're asking the question of the planning committee, I guess,
am,
is what
because
I'm
I
trying
figured
to figure
I
out.
am, and
Okay.
mainly because we do have 3 council members that have done housing for a long time. So I figured that just because I think maybe there's a reason it should be, maybe they, as longstanding members, have done this before a few times and might be able to point me in the right direction.
Mr. Young.
Thank you. Just to make sure I'm clear, are you suggesting, I want to make sure I'm understanding what you're asking. You're wanting this to be part of a deeper discussion we do as council, correct?
I'm just trying to find out when the discussion would happen. Do we have that discussion as council? Does it happen at the planning committee level? I don't want to miss, it seems like the comprehensive plan is a great opportunity to provide, the vision and what we want to do, and I just want to make sure there are things that don't get missed.
So to be clear, you would like to make sure this is part of the comprehensive plan discussion in one way or another?
I would, if it's appropriate, I definitely would.
I agree with you. I just, I think that however we have to do it, I think it's a big discussion about who we are, where we are, and how we want to get there. I think it's an important part. I do.
So
How
to
do we
bring,
do that?
trying
I
to
don't know.
bring the discussion back to the topic before the council, I think the planning committee is trying to identify areas where they would like the planning commission to focus on, as they believe that that would help the planning commission work its way through the many different topics that they're going to have to deal with.
So everything that's listed on here basically will get discussed, and the finer points will be able to be discussed at the planning commission?
Well, again, as I read that, with the exception of the exclude items,
Okay.
and
So I
if
should
somebody
focus
on
on
the planning
those.
commission, planning committee, so this is going to trip us all up, saying planning committee, planning commission. So if that's the intention of the planning committee, you can speak up now.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
To clarify a little bit, yeah, so these are the list of items that are in the Housing Action Plan, and we suggest that the ones that we said include, staff should affirmatively put in front of the Planning Commission, and when we talk about Planning Commission, it's not the Planning Commission, it is the public process, which includes the public and the Planning Commission, and then ultimately us. But what we're saying is the include items should be the staff should push those affirmatively in front of the public process. In that process, the Planning Commission, the public, others, may come up with other ideas that are outside of that scope. That's fine. And then those might organically move forward. We could start from zero as well, but then you wouldn't hit all these things. So the point is to select these items that we definitely want discussed, but they're not necessarily limited to those things. There's no limiting factor here. With respect to impact fees, though, impact fees are not development regulations nor comprehensive plan policies. So I would expect that we would have the exclusive discussion on impact fees. And we could modify those at any time. The rates are more limiting because they need to be based on the actual projects that are in the CFP. But exclusions like ADUs or not, we could manage that at any moment. But I see a waiver.
I also like to throw in the planning department between the planning commission and the planning committee. So the planning department fully intends to allow encourage the planning commission to discuss this exactly as Councilman Walters explained. I just wanted, as far as the ADU impact fees, in my past experience, I've seen the planning commission also often likes to weigh in, like whether or not there should be, but I usually discourage them from setting fees, and so they may recommend yay or nay on that, but that ultimately fees is entirely city council, but just because it's all kind of baked into the same process, often planning commissions will give some recommendations about what they think about the fee part, if there should be fees at least.
Well, I appreciate the clarification from Mr. Walters that this is not going to exclude, and I want to make it very clear to the public that this is not, I do not believe it's the planning committee's intention to exclude the public for bringing anything that they feel needs to be brought before the planning commission. So
Sure.
I do not think that is the intent. The intent is to guide the staff on limited, and I certainly recognize that my planning staff has limited resources. So
I have one more.
Mr. Fantini.
I promise
Okay.
it'll be the last one. And thank you for allowing me to learn and ask these questions, because it helps me understand the process a lot more. The last one I had is an exclude one, and I'm just curious as to why. It's 4.3.4 industrial zones. And when I read this one, what was interesting to me is I know MJB had some things that they had brought up about housing in industrial zones. And when I read what was in here, sorry, I'm trying to find it real quick so that I can, sorry. Okay, it talks about in the next major comprehensive plan, update, review long-term demand and supply of land needed for industrial purposes. One of the things that is talked about in here is that there is a lot of land around that might not be needed or used anymore for these industrial purposes. And I'm just curious, because this asked for kind of an assessment of the industrial land to see based on the changes and the businesses that we've had. Obviously, the land remains valuable to definitely support employment and commerce, but is it worth, because it had said consider the integration of workforce housing as part of mixed-use industrial or commercial developments, and it kind of wanted us to study that a little bit. Is there a reason why we don't want to study that?
Sounds like another question for the planning committee.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters.
I think the committee just didn't want to go there. We just didn't want to start down the path of rezoning our industrial zones that are available for industrial uses, or even the light manufacturing zones that are available for commercial uses, because once they become residential, we really can't get them back, especially for uses that may conflict with residential uses. So generally where we said exclude, we thought either it's a third rail or it's not someplace that it's desirable to spend the limited resources of staff as we go through.
Okay.
And as far as planning purposes go, it's incredibly challenging to find lands that are appropriate for industrial, flat, not near residential properties, near other industrial properties. So if we ever need to
have need for industrial land, it's very, very, very challenging to expand your industrial land base zoning-wise. So it's not good planning practice to eliminate industrial zone property. Plus, if you start allowing residential uses in and around the industrial land, now you're creating conflicts.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? I don't have a recommended action here, except I think it's just for the council to provide this guidance. So I guess I would ask, is there anything that's terribly offensive to any members of the council, exclude, include, et cetera?
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Hubick, thank you.
Nothing terribly offensive, I promise.
That's
I was
probably the
just-
wrong words to use, but that's what came to mind.
I do want to recognize and thank the team for including in the line item around group living. I think it's one step above a well-regulated commune, and it's something that's very interesting and that we've seen other states and other municipalities do really well. I lived in a dorm, and I mean, it wasn't necessarily 3 bathrooms for 10 people down a long hallway, but for some people that are, moving out of a house, regardless whether or not it's domestic disturbances or disputes or violence or just trying to get on their feet for the first time, having a roof over your head's really nice, and sometimes you just don't need much. And then I'm also really interested seeing single room occupancy housing. I know that I've seen that done really well in California, and usually that's something that's, I wish I had a better word for it. It's not necessarily halfway housing, but it's not necessarily supportive living. Can anyone give me a definition as to what the single room occupancy housing means for this, and where it's evolved from the housing action plan, if anything?
Anybody, planning committee? Yeah.
Mayor Miller.
All right, Mr. Walters.
If I recall correctly, I think one of the tasks is to articulate a definition of single room occupancy. I think it generally is shared kitchen space, sometimes shared bathroom space, but not necessarily always.
All right. Anything more that the planning committee wants to communicate to the council about this? I'll call out the other planning committee members. Ms. Moulton.
Thank you. So Ms. Hubick, yes, so the Wilson Hotel is similar to an SRO. And this type of housing used to be more prevalent for people with lower incomes particularly, and very valuable affordable housing options, but they were zoned and demolished out of existence starting in the 1970s. So we already define and regulate rooming houses, which is a similar concept to an SRO, but they're limited to 9 sleeping rooms and only allowed in a few zones, but SROs are recommended to be allowed in some non-residential zones and to be larger, so that all that can be explored. Welcome.
All right, Ms. Cleveland McGrath.
Thank you. I just wanted to step back a little bit so that the rest of the council members who weren't there sitting for the last couple of meetings through the planning committee discussions. I think that, at least personally, was really trying to look at the housing action plan and those recommendations that we received from the consultants when that plan was created, and look at the lens of what are the highest priority, biggest impact when it comes to improving housing for our community. We know that it's an issue across the state, across the country. It's a priority for AWC, it's a priority for us. So we wanted, or at least I wanted, to make sure that we highlighted, and the majority of them are highlighted, so that Planning Commission and the public could do a deep dive. A number of these items, even though it's included, didn't mean we had consensus as a committee. That's not what we should be doing at a committee level. It needs to go to the public. The public needs to be able to talk about it. We need to have staff prepare in their professional capacity what issues or questions that the public should be looking at and considering, and then have Planning Commission do that deep dive. At the same time, we know that Planning Commission and staff has an incredible amount of work to do over the next couple of years with the comprehensive plan update happening in tandem. So I think that the one thing I would talk about, because the short-term rental owner-occupied question came up, I think that it's a really slippery slope, and at least for me, talking about those short-term rentals gets everyone riled up and off the rails, and the number of short-term rentals potentially in our community does not have as great of an impact on housing issues and improving housing for our community as some of these other items that we could focus on right now. When we talk about owner-occupied short-term rentals, does that mean a bedroom and a bathroom? Once you go to an ADU, now that is, you're taking a housing stock away from a person who either is going to be there 30 plus days, whether it's a traveling nurse. No one's limiting, short-term rentals it's less than 30 days, right? So there's still an opportunity to have shorter rentals available, shorter term rentals, but I think it's a really slippery slope of what does that short-term rental owner-occupied look like? Where do we put those limitations? How would staff implement those expectations? And so that's kind of why it seemed like it wasn't, at least in the scope of talking about our housing action plan, didn't fit in like under that umbrella of housing action plan. What are those recommendations, and what recommendations from the housing action plan should we move forward to the public for Planning Commission to listen and review? So hopefully, I know it's still an issue that we need to discuss as the multifamily tax exemption program is too, but it didn't quite fit, at least under this goal.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
To tag on to that and engage in the substantive discussion about short-term rentals, I also agree that we could take that on, and I would be okay with doing that as limited to owner-occupied spaces. But there are a lot of choices to be made there, and those choices weren't presented in the plan, and like the other recommendations are, they weren't presented as development regulation changes ready to go. And I think that's because there are a lot of choices and work to be done in that space before we know what we might want to propose. We could work on that separate from the comp plan update, start having discussions about it, including in an ad hoc committee, about what that might look like and how we might move that forward. But I do think it would start to consume all the oxygen in the comp plan update. And it is important to differentiate all the short-term rental stuff from the ADU regs, because ADU is a housing type and short-term rental is a use. And so some of the ADU regulations that we have already adopted are those that are required by state law, but there are more that are required to be changed by state law. And I think if we leave alone short-term rentals at the moment, at least in the context of the comp plan, everything's kind of at that status quo, and if we are changing multiple levers at the same time, it will become a lot more complicated. But still, I think we could engage in that discussion. I'm aware of some software programs that help us regulate short-term rentals that are newly available. We have talked about, and I think actually there was a proposal a while back to regulate the existing short-term rentals, the ones that are grandfathered in but are not allowed under the zoning code. There's a lot of work to be done there, but it to me makes sense as a standalone project that isn't necessarily trying to get done at the same time as the comp plan update, and it's not intrinsically linked to the comp plan update.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Moulton.
I just want to piggyback on those statements by Ms. Cleland McGrath and Mr. Walters. We did try to choose the things that would bear the most fruit and get us closest to our goals and prioritize in that way. And the things that are included, like Ms. Cleland McGrath said, they're not necessarily things that like we're advocating for, like this is what we want. It's more that this is the conversation, this is part of the conversation the community needs to have now. And bring that forward to us. I think it'll be great, actually. I look forward to hearing from people. And then again, the ADU thing, I mean, even in this meeting, we've talked about it a lot already. It's taking up a lot. So I think that having a standalone conversation about that would be more fruitful.
I will point out that ADU is in the include on here, though. So, no, I understand where the committee was going, and I appreciate, I just want to make sure that the entire council is okay with this.
I misspoke. I meant short-term
okay,
rentals. I
sorry.
apologize.
Oh.
Thank you for catching me
Sorry.
on that. See how confusing
Yeah,
it can be?
yes, it can be, and I think if council feels comfortable, this is enough guidance for staff, then I see head nods. I don't think there needs to make a formal motion or anything, but okay. Well, thank you. Good discussion, and
So as staff, will just go with the list as it is, no additions or subtractions.
that's what I understand now.
Okay,
and
great, thank
Again, again, I will point out to the public that doesn't mean you're excluded from discussing these items through this comp plan process. In fact, it's another opportunity to just encourage public participation as we move through this comprehensive plan process. All right, so item 8 is adjournment. No further business before the council. I'll adjourn tonight's meeting. Thank you.